People need to be thinking about, what does legacy mean to me? And legacy, most people think legacy means, oh, my name's on the door. It's Simon Bedard and Associates, and I'm worried about what the next guy will do with it. No, most people don't name their business like that anymore. It's about, I think legacy is a lot about what will people think of you and what you've done after you've left the room. And for some people, they'll say, that means nothing to me, I don't care. And if that's the case, great. You have no emotional attachment to it. That's absolutely fine and probably quite a mental healthy place to be if you've thought about it and agreed on that. But a lot of people have deep relationships with suppliers and customers and staff and other people in and around the business, and they believe the business itself had a purpose, and they care about that purpose and where it goes after they've handed the baton on.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Few. Boom, time stamping it, still in lockdown for the time machine. 200 years from now, we'll be listening to this very specific podcast and reflecting on, remember those days when we were back in lockdown. I've just realized I've accidentally made myself look like the Chicago Bears, like number one supporter. I don't know how I managed to do that. It was just been the outfit that was lying at the bottom of the door when I walked up here today. Anyway, lucky it's a podcast. Hey, Shawnee, how are you, mate?
Yeah, really good, mate. Really good. Thankfully, we got out of lockdown on Sunday up here in Queensland, but yeah, definitely feeling for everyone down in New South Wales for sure.
Tell you what, wish I had shares in microphones and webcams. No doubt, absolutely killing it. I'm really excited today. A little bit. If you're sensing I'm subdued, I've had about 2 hours sleep thanks to a screaming 4-week-old child all night, and trying to find that yin and yang balance between being a good father and functioning the next day to actually earn some money to keep the child in its in clothes and food. So I apologise if I tune out or go cross-eyed. But today's guest, I'm super excited to have a chat about, because this particular individual operates in a space, I think, that's quite emotionally charged. And we have a lot of people here on The Few that own their own businesses. One day they're looking to exit a business. You've been around it a bit too, haven't you, Shawnee? You kind of know that exiting or trading businesses, but particularly getting out of a business, is quite a big deal, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I spent well over 8 years in corporate finance myself, so capital raising, acquisitions, mergers, exits, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's an interesting space. Mind you, I've done those transactions on my own probably over 23, 24 times now, I think, with any sort of acquisition or exit. And yet it is definitely can be an emotional experience. It can be challenging, trying to manage people's expectations and all the rest of it. So I'm really excited to chat to somebody who does this full-time as their day job and helping other people to really realize the value from their business.
Yeah, and like everything, there's always a bit of a formula, and people sometimes cut corners and don't get the right advice when they're doing this. So look, with no further ado, let's bring this superhero pro exiteer onto the show. Simon Bedard, thanks so much, mate, for coming onto The Few with Sean and myself today.
Welcome, Simon.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So I might jump in first and ask the question: what got you into helping people exit businesses, advising people on exiting businesses? I found that space it could be quite transactional in a lot of ways, rather than, I suppose, as necessarily relationship driven as what I do now. And that was how my take on it. But why have you got into it? What do you feel you draw from the experience of helping people, exit every day?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Sean. And I think you sort of touched on it there about seeing how transactional the industry can be. My brief background, I guess, I was in banking and finance and whatnot, and left in the GFC and started a business with my wife. We ended up buying into another company before we sort of built it up a bit and sold out. And so we did that full cycle. We start up, buying, building, then selling, and I find that whole cycle of business quite interesting. Some people just do it once in their whole life. Some people, like yourself, Sean, done it many, many times. And I guess what I found being in business for myself was it was both exhilarating and yet absolutely freaking terrifying. Particularly the first time round, you know, you're putting money in, I often laugh and say to people, if you haven't had a couple of sleepless nights where you're not sure if your business is going to make it, you probably haven't been in business.
Just a couple? Just a couple?
Yeah. Well, you know,
a couple of months inconsistently, or years even. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously people listening to this can't see, but I did have hair once, right? So, you know, look, I came out of our first real kind of venture. I did do another stint in corporate, but after that, it really changed my life being a business owner and seeing what it was like on the other side of the fence. And, you know, I did find it terrifying at stages and stressful and all those sort of things, but I did find it super exciting, and I developed a real passion for it. And I guess after I finished that stint, I, as I said, I went back into corporate for a little while, and which was kind of a good experience, but also amusing when you've been on the other side of the fence. And my wife and I decided we wanted to go into business for ourselves again after a number of years in corporate, and we sort of decided that startups were way too hard, so let's go and buy a business. And look, we were kind of knew what we were looking for. We were self-funded. We were really on a mission. And so we went out and started making a lot of inquiries and dealing with a lot of business brokers. And I guess what we found in that experience as a buyer was that it was very transactional. There was a lot of brokers out there who I felt lacked the education, experience, qualifications to really be representing a lot of the clients that they were representing.
One thing I found, Simon, when I got my business broking license was that I had to get my real estate license, and it was about 5 minutes of extra stuff that was the business broking license, which the 95% or more of the content I'd just done was about open houses and auctions and all sort of crap. Whereas as a business broker, that's a very strategic transaction, and the license that they've created is a tiny extension to the real estate license. And I honestly believe it is not even remotely the same thing. And it was bloody laughable. It really was. I found that and I think that's where a large part of the lack of knowledge and education is coming from, is that you could pretty much just open a cornflakes packet and get a qualification as a business broker, you know?
Spot on. That's exactly right. Whoever dreamt up the idea that business brokers and real estate agents should be managed under the same legislation clearly has rocks in their head. It is such a different.
As if government would know the difference, right?
Yeah. Well, look, you know, and in fairness, Boo, like a lot of it's down to the fact that, you know, if you go back historically, a lot of real estate agents were out in the bush and they were dealing with farmers who had a business attached to that property. And so it was complicated, and it sort of evolved. And unfortunately, the world of business sales, the legislation hasn't kept up with the level of sophistication that's really required for this kind of work. And so, you know, what you end up with is a lot of half-cocked semi-real estate agents thinking, well, if I could sell the business, they'll let me sell the property. And, you know, it's sort of that evolution. And just frankly, there's a lot more real estate agents than there are business brokers, so they have a larger voice when it comes to the legislation and the lobbying. So look, it is what it is. I think we saw a big gap there. And, you know, I guess when I was making inquiries on businesses and people were sending me 1 or 2 page Word documents that were unformatted and calling it an information memorandum, it just made me want to throw up. And so, and you know, the thing is, and this is the guts of this, right, is that I didn't end up buying a business. I probably, to be quite honest, I got probably a little too cute and thought I was too clever and negotiated myself out of some deals because I was trying to play too hard. But I did find some deals and not all brokers were like that. I did meet some guys who were professional, and I took my hat off to them. But far too many of them were not representing their clients the way they should. And what it made me think about, and my wife think about, was that, hey, imagine that was us. Like when we were running our business, like we were absolutely all in, boots and all. Like if this fails, we lose our home. Our kids are, God knows where we're going to go live, and that sort of pressure is real and palpable. And, I guess I looked at a lot of these business owners and I thought, this business is probably their largest asset. And the thought of somebody going out there and having a, share portfolio or whatever else being managed by some person who's not qualified to do so is unheard of, right? We're so used to regulation in financial services. And so I just looked at that and thought, I wonder how many of these brokers have even done this with their own money. Here you are telling a business owner what to do and you've not done it. So I guess we looked at that and saw there was a real gap between what the market and these business owners deserved and what a lot of them were getting. I'm not going to say we rushed off completely inspired. Oh, wow, we found the next big thing. Like, to be frank, from having that thought to actually launching Exit Advisory Group was probably a 2-year gap. It took a real lot of time to really ruminate on, sort of think about it and research it and whatnot. But, I guess bottom line, what it all comes down to for me, guys, is that we have a deep-seated belief that it's actually business owners and entrepreneurs who actually change the world. Like, these are the people that look out there and go, I can see that this thing in society is not working, or there's a problem here that people aren't solving properly. I'm actually going to go and do something about this and not talk about it or whinge to my government or whatever. I'm going to put time and money and effort into solving this particular problem. And yes, I want a return for it, but I'm willing to take the risk and put in the effort to solve that problem. And if we didn't have people like that, we'd still be living in caves.
Yeah, and small business too, Simon, is the backbone of the whole economy.
Definitely
that so many people in the country are employed by small business. So
absolutely,
not only small business owners, like ourselves, going out there, paving the way, having the lots and lots of sleepless nights, trying to manage relationships and kids and all the other fun stuff that comes with it. Particularly if you're working with your partner as well, it always adds another layer of complexity. And it's like, where does business stop and where does personal begin? But it's that element that that small business itself is dramatically undervalued or perceived as lower value. And there was a story once. I remember a guy, this older gentleman, was at an event and he stood up and because they were talking about selling businesses, and this guy got on the microphone and stood up and said, it would have been nice for me to know this a couple like 18 months ago or 2 years ago, whatever it was. He said, because I had a business and I didn't know you could sell a business, so I shut it down. And they're like, oh, so tell us about your business. He says, it was a 35-year business and my kids didn't want it. I was making about $2 million a year. Had a team that had been there for, a decade or more. And so I wound it up. My accountant told me to wind it up. And everyone just went, what? It was like a knife to the heart that everyone could feel this guy's legacy was just taken away from him because he had this business doing $2 million profit a year, which is probably worth, 3-4 times multiple, depending on who you're going to, maybe slightly more. That's even insane. Depending on who you're going for. Gone. Yeah. Just evaporated all his whole life's work. It was like freaking tragic.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the thing is, and I'm sure, tell me if you have a different view here, guys, but I look around out there and I see so much information on how to start a business, how to grow a business and how to have a business plan and all this sort of stuff. But there just wasn't enough people talking about how to actually exit, how to actually finish the journey. And, like the example you gave there, Sean, like some people will work for 30, 40, 50 years, right, in this business. And there's not enough focus on how to actually finish that journey properly. And so it's the whole thing. They've run a marathon, they've rounded the last corner, there's 100 meters to go, and whoop, that's where they fall over and break a leg, and they end up dragging themselves over a finish line in a horrendous fashion in a lot of ways. And or frankly, look, some of them, it's not always tragedy that they end in. Like sometimes they'll end and they'll have money and they'll probably be able to live comfortably, but it could be the difference between ending comfortably and ending amazingly well and having a massive impact and leaving a wonderful legacy. And, just being able to, I guess, I don't want to say tick boxes. It's about leaving feeling like you're fulfilled and you've completed your purpose. And I guess there's just not enough people that are talking about that. And how do you actually feel leave fulfilled? How do you complete your purpose in that business journey? And to your point before, Sean, there's a lot of people that will say, "Oh, I'll sell your business for you. Yeah, I'll sell it." That's great. Like a lot of people could sell a business, but what I would hate to think that I would sell a client's business and a year later they turn around to me and say, "Simon, that was the worst thing I ever did. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't mentally prepared for what life would look like afterwards. I'm just gutted." And by the way, that happens a lot to people. And why? Because a lot of people say, oh, yeah, you should sell your business. It'll be great. You'll have some money in the bank. Yeah, money in the bank's nice. But if you don't have any purpose in life and you don't have any direction, well, money's actually kind of meaningless in a lot of ways.
There's a lot of psychology around it, isn't there? Like ending anything is something that we don't like. We love starting stuff. We love doing new things. We love shiny stuff. But wherever, whether it's a relationship or the end of a 3-series binge on Netflix, whenever it comes to the end of something, there's just like it's an uncomfortable place to be. Do you see that psychology in what you do, Simon? Do you see that there's some
the sunk cost
real
bias
angst in that part of the business transaction?
Yeah, definitely. And this is the thing. This is why I think you don't want to wake up one day and go, right, that's it, I'm done, sell the business. Like, that is the worst possible way to actually exit, because you've not thought about all of these non-financial things. Not to mention, by the way, that if you do that, the valuation may not be worth what you want it to be worth, and you've got no time to fix it. So yeah, mate, look, I definitely think that's an issue around that kind of remorse factor. People need to be thinking about, what does legacy mean to me? And legacy, most people think legacy means, oh, my name's on the door. It's Simon Bedard and Associates, and I'm worried about what the next guy will do with it. No, most people don't name their business like that anymore. It's about, I think legacy is a lot about what will people think of you and what you've done after you've left the room. And for some people, they'll say, that means nothing to me, I don't care. And if that's the case, great. You have no emotional attachment to it. That's absolutely fine, and probably quite a mental healthy place to be if you've thought about it and agreed on that. But a lot of people have deep relationships with suppliers and customers and staff and other people in and around the business, and they believe the business itself had a purpose, and they care about that purpose and where it goes after they've handed the batten on. So yeah.
And every business serves a purpose, right? Like every business worth selling is actually is serving somebody, and that, I think that it's like retiring. Like, it's like, wow, I've run this business, family business, 30 years, I'm going to leave. And it's like, you're not just leaving a business, you're abandoning a huge part of your identity.
Well, and I want to stop you there, Boo, because only for the fact that you're right. And a lot of business owners do have that exact thing. They feel like they're losing a part of themselves, and they feel a sense of loss. Some people even start questioning their sense of self-worth. What I'd be advocating for is, you don't want to have that feeling of loss. You don't want to attach your business and your sense of self-worth to each other. I think with enough time and thinking and consideration, pondering, get advice, whatever, but you want to detach those things. You want to be able to see your business as its own entity, so that you don't feel that sense of loss, that you can actually part ways with it and go, hey, you know what? Like, yeah, there will be things about this that I will miss, but I know that it's going to go on and do its own thing. I've got to set it free and let it, become whatever it's going to become. And I know that I have a sense of purpose and worth over here doing other things. That to me is a great outcome, because, we want people to be happy and excited about their next phase of life. And let's be honest, like, change is the only thing, that we can be really guaranteed of in these sort of things, right?
Absolutely. And music to my ears, Simon. I mean, that's big part of the mentoring program I run in a circle. Is the goal is to move people from where they are, basically being a business doer or not even a business owner most of the time, where the business is actually being run on their own nervous system. So if they have a good day, they're all happy. And if something happens in the business, they're all down in the dumps and they're all being smashed energetically. And, it's like the pendulum just swinging backwards and forwards, up, down, up, down, up, down. And it's a nightmare. I know I was there for many, many years in my own business journey, but seeing that, as you're saying there, it's about separating oneself from the business. And it's like if you, when your kids grew up and became teenagers and left, you were still attached as if they were, a 1-year-old. You're going to have a lot of trouble letting go of them actually, leaving the nest, so to speak. And that piece of that we focus on. Yeah,
not much of a problem.
Well, the piece that we focus on is moving people to that investor mindset, so that they actually look at their business as an investment, not as them. So it's a journey, as you said before. You can't go, oh, I'm over it, I'm done, I'm going to sell it tomorrow. Well, if you do that, 90% of it's not ready. You're going to get cents on the dollar in value of all of the years of work you've put in. What's best to do is, and for everyone on the this thing, and I'm going to ask you something about this in a sec, but is to start now. Start building the business so it is saleable, You don't have to sell it, but build it so it is ready to be sold at any given point in time. You may keep it for another 10 or 20 years. Yeah. But if you've got it to that point where it is saleable, it's purely a decision because it's no longer part of your identity. And I guess that's the question that's coming from in doing some a bit of research and background on yourself and what you stand for, Simon, is one thing that came up in one of your videos is I want to ask you, how important has it been in your own journey to have people to give you advice, to mentor you and support you on your journey?
Yeah, massive, Sean. So just to, I guess, paraphrase what you were saying there, we've got a little bit of a saying here in our business is that, at the end of the day, none of us are actually born to do business. Business is just a thing. It's a creation to solve problems and whatever else. We're actually born to live our life. And I believe that your business should simply be a vehicle for delivering you the life you want. So the most important question you should be asking yourself is not should I grow by 10x and blah, blah, blah. It's what life do I want? What's important? And I don't mean by just, I'd like to drive a fancy car and all that stuff. That's all lovely. And that's all okay if that's important to you. How do you want to spend your time? What do you stand for as a human being? What is important? I always think too, if you want to know what's important to a man, look at his diary and look at his credit card statement. You'll see where they spend their time and money, right? And so I just think a lot of people, before you get to the business stuff, ask yourself what's really deeply important to you as a human, and then start saying, well, how do we shape this business to deliver what we want over here? And so, that element, and you asked how do I see advising and consulting and external advice as being important? I see it as being critical. I have a business coach. I've got plenty of advisors around me. I've always had mentors in my life, even sometimes when I actually didn't realize they were there. And aren't they just the most beautiful ones because they put up with you despite your
bullshit.
Your bullshit and my childish tantrums that I'd probably throw, and my wife's probably laughing right now when she hears this. You still do that, actually.
We've all been there. I saw Boo that the other
mentor?
day. So.
Where is he? What's his number?
He's not doing his job today. Yeah. Look, we've just watched the Olympics, right? And I don't know about you blokes, but I reckon every time I turned the TV on, I had tears in my eyes looking at how good some of those sports people were and what amazing humans they were. You want to perform at a high level in anything in life, you need a coach. And whether you want to call them a coach or an advisor or whatever, like at the end of the day, you need somebody to call you on your bullshit, to give you some guidance, somebody who knows how to do the things you're doing probably in a better way, and just hold up a mirror sometimes, right? So I think
we can't do it to ourselves. It's humanly, as much as we think we're the most self-aware, self-diagnosing, spiritual tree-hugging machine, we're just not equipped. We're too busy doing. If we reflect all the time, we're not doing anything. And I was thinking about this today. Actually, it's an interesting point. How you could diagrammatically represent it. It's like if you had someone standing next to their best friend, right, and you'd have, what do you think of yourself? And it'd be this tangle of emotions and thoughts, and then you'd have your best friend that'd be like, oh, cool, caring, and relaxed. Yeah. Boom, simple. And we just, that as you get older as well, and you think of all the years you didn't have someone like that, and you're like, oh, all those decisions, all I needed was just one person who just would have said, well, dude,
pull your head in.
It's amazing. I think it's such awesome advice, Simon. Got a question for you. A lot of people talk about what business do you get into in terms of having low barriers to entry, what are easy businesses to start, what grows quickly. Are there some businesses that are just easier to sell than others?
I guess I get asked questions similar to this. I guess a lot of it has are there industries that are better, or are there kind of different models that are better? And I mean, the answer, of course, is yes and no. The easiest business to sell is the one that's, hotly in demanded by buyers. Like if somebody wants to buy it, well, it's going to be reasonably easy to sell. Of course, actually determining what buyers really want and stuff like that is always a lot more complicated than what a lot of vendors like to think. So, I think if you're looking for things that people should try to build into their business, I'm a massive believer of, looking at your business through the eyes of buyers and saying, well, what would somebody want? How do I shape my business for value? Because I do think a lot of business owners, I'll include myself in this as well. We all get caught up a little bit with the whole, we've got to get more revenue and, hey, we need to squeeze more margin and more profit. And, those revenue and profit are critical in any business, as we all know, but they're not actual value drivers. They're outcomes. And so I'm always sort of suggesting that we need to look within the business and say, well, what's the qualitative elements that actually, what is your system for generating revenue and profit? So there's lots of little things like, what's your business model? Are you transactional? Are you project-based? Do you have ongoing revenues? I'm seeing amazing things happening with businesses out there with nice, stable, recurring revenues. Why? Because it's related to risk, right? I think when you're looking at a business, all business buyers, fundamentally, they're looking at your business and saying, I'm looking to purchase your future stream of profit and revenue, of course, and then applying discounts to valuations based on risk. So you need to demonstrate that there's less risk in your business, that there's going to be a problem delivering more revenue and more profit. I mean, that's
so Simon,
that's
can
really...
I just jump in for a sec there, right? The one key point that people need to hear, and they don't seem to hear it, which is it's better for you yourself to find the risks in your business and remove them before you try and sell it to somebody else and they uncover those risks. So hence going back to get somebody who can advise you and say, hey, you know what, your systems and processes suck. That all the knowledge is in your head and it's too risky that if you get hit by a bus, someone buying your business is not going to be able to run your business. And so the key, what I'm hearing from you is get clear on the risks first before you start to sell it, because you're going to maximize that. Then there's less places that person can apply a discount to the value because you've already plugged all those holes.
Yeah, you're spot on. I'll say a couple of things around risk. One is you need to be upfront with all those risks because everything comes out in due diligence, absolutely everything. And I'm of the view that no business is actually perfect. So if we start with that as our premise, we don't expect this business to be perfect. Neither does the buyer, by the way. So we're just better if we have risks within our business. Yeah, sure, if we can fix them or mitigate them, great, let's do that. But if we can't mitigate them all, and let's be honest, we can't mitigate every risk in life or there'd be no return, let's put the risk on the table with the buyers. Let's identify it. Let's name it and say, hey, we recognize that there's risks in this business. Here's how we would deal with them if we remained in the business. Of course, you may have a different view, but by being upfront and being open and talking about those things, you actually build trust and you're more likely to get a transaction done. So that's the first thing about being upfront and being open about potential risks in your business. But the other thing I'll say about risk, because it's a funny one, is that a lot of business owners actually don't see the risks in their own business. I liken it a little bit, and this is the thing about having an advisor, right? Sometimes you're too close to it, can't see the forest for the trees. I'm sure we can come up with a whole bunch of analogies and sayings and cliches around this, but I liken this a little bit to flying, right? If I'm shit scared of flying, I don't care what you say to me. I'm going to see a lot of risk in getting on a plane, right? But the pilot who's sitting up there and he's clocked up thousands and thousands of hours, and no, I didn't pick this just because Boo's a pilot, but hey, nice.
So mate, good analogy. I like where this is going. Yeah, you can use this. Yeah.
So, but the pilot obviously has a very, very different sense of the risk of being in that plane. Now, the reality of that risk, we're sitting on the same plane. The risk is the same to both of us, but our perception of those risks is very, very different. So what an owner needs to do, and clearly the owner is the pilot in this case, right, is that they often don't see the risks how other people might see them. And so we become used to things in business these days where it just, we haven't had any dramas, so I'm not thinking about it anymore. I don't perceive it to be a risk any longer. But somebody new coming in may see red flags going off all over the place. So once again, you've got to get out of your kind of groove of being the business owner and this is my world with my blinkers on, walk around to the other side of the table and say, well, if I was in their shoes, if I was buying this business, where would I pick holes in this?
Absolutely. And one thing that I found too in this process, being on both the seller side and the buyer side, and more so on the buyer side, a business partner and I rolled up a number of mortgage broking businesses a number of years ago, rolled them together, got massive, arbitrage, which is an uplift in value just by buying something. We made, I think, 7 figures of increased value just by buying stuff without doing thin air, right? People don't understand how to do that. And today's not the podcast to teach you how to do that. But the point is that as a buyer and a seller, the one of the statements that I was told very early on from a mentor of mine, an early mentor of mine, is that every conversation is a negotiation, right? So we've got to look at it and say, when we're in that transaction, whether we're a buyer or a seller, we've got to look at it and say, okay, what are my must-haves, right, in a situation? And what are my nice-to-haves? So you do not budge on your must-haves, but you be flexible on the nice-to-haves. Because if you can give on one hand and have the other party give on the other, it may balance out, but it still doesn't move your must-haves. And part of the thing as a buyer, one of the things I always did was always put in place a level of insurance, so to speak, by not fully paying for the business up front, paying based on performance. Sometimes that meant that over that 12 months, I actually paid more for the business than I agreed to in the first place. Therefore, the seller got more. But because we
buying a
structured
business or getting married, mate, I'm getting lost.
It might be interchangeable, but likewise, one of the businesses that we bought, which was a just under $2 million acquisition, we withheld some of the funding because part of it was vendor finance, so financed by the person selling it. For those on the podcast that don't understand what that means, so they'd funded half of it. So we funded half of it with cash, and they funded the other half. And we had some ratchet clauses in there, which meant that if they didn't meet certain requirements, i.e., their team went and stole the clients off the book, which they did, we got to claw it back, and we ended up pulling back $280,000 off that purchase price to protect us, right? Because that person, the seller's team or ex-team, didn't do the right thing. So you've got to look at it and go, okay, well, that was a risk for me as a buyer, and I mitigated that risk as much as I possibly could. It still hurt. We didn't get quite the outcome we wanted, but it was still a profitable purchase. But it is that you've got to have that ability to negotiate, that there isn't just one way. You don't just sell a business, get a big check and walk away. If you're willing to stay in that business for a period of time to impart the knowledge and support the new owners coming in or whatever, you can potentially get a higher value, you know? So, and actually one thing that popped up again in when I was doing the research was I'm going to ask a question. You know, let's have a scenario, right? Let's say that Boo's selling his business, right? And I come along and I'm a potential buyer. I'm interested in buying Boo's business, right? What's the worst thing Boo can do right now for the next 6 to however many months it's going to take to actually get that transaction locked away? What's the worst thing he can do?
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's so many different variables here, Sean, that you could be talking about. But one of the big things I see is business owners get tapped on the shoulder by a prospective buyer who says, "Oh, hey, I'm really interested in your business." And yeah, let's be honest here, right? Somebody taps you on the shoulder and says they want to buy you. I mean, that's a pretty kind of cool thing to have happen, right? I mean, head starts to expand rather rapidly. You know, you're starting to walk a little bit taller. You feel good about yourself. And of course, often that kind of approach comes from a nice kind of non-threatening, friendly source. And so you feel pretty good about this relationship and you feel pretty good about the whole potential outcomes. What I'd say, though, is that a lot of people go down this path of dealing one-on-one with a buyer who's reached out to them, and they just look, and not saying that this is intentional, but often they just end up getting burnt. And the reason for that is that the buyer's reached out to them, and buyer has very specific criteria that they want. And they ask for information, and then they need more information, and they're having lots of meetings, and the vendor at this point in time, the seller, has spent an enormous amount of time and effort, it's sometimes like a second job, trying to move the needle on this. And of course, 6 months in, they're now starting to feel quite committed to this, because somewhere in the back of their brain, they've started spending money. You know, they're starting to see the beach coming, and they're getting excited about this next stage of life. And, you know, really often they get to the end of this process. And by the way, I've seen this take 18 months with some clients, where they get to the end and the buyer's like, do you know, I just keep seeing little things and I keep chipping away at the price and discounting it. And that's when the final offer comes in, and it is so much lower than what the actual owner, A, thought it was worth, and B, was originally told. And I guess there's this feeling of immense loss and sometimes betrayal. They feel like they've really been led up the garden path. You know, many of them will basically throw their hands in the air and walk off. Others, unfortunately, actually just go, "Oh my God, I'm so beaten down, just take the deal." And I think those are less than ideal outcomes. So, you know, I'm not sure if this was the particular risk you were referring to, Sean, but I'd always just say to business owners that when you go to sell a business, you either put buyers through a really robust process that's designed to get the outcome you need, or they will put you through their process And I can tell you their process is designed to get them the right outcome, not
Absolutely.
you. So,
Totally agree. That's what I was getting at, is the fact that it starts to distract business owners. And even to add to that, one of the transactions I supported probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, they had offer I think it was, let's just use some round numbers, it was about 800 grand was the offer, on this business. It was well and truly worth that. It took like 9 or 10 months to go through. And what had happened is they're like, cool, this person's going to buy it. So for that 9 or 10 months, they started working on their next business. And so the current business's results started to go down, 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 down. And by the time they sold it, 10 months later, they got 450. So they almost got 50% of what they're originally going to get because they took their eye off the ball. So the thing is, until the money's in the bank, you've got to act like your business is still your business 100% and it's not being sold. Otherwise,
and you're going to run it for the long term too. Don't do short-termism just because you're in the middle of a transaction. It's, in fact, I even get asked the question a lot as to, we were thinking of investing in this thing, a machine, a process, or whatever. It could be ISO, whatever. I'm wondering if we should really be spending that money because it might come off our, it's an expense or whatever, and it might reduce our profit. And so, look, you know what? Run your business like you're going to keep running it forever. Like if you believe that is the best thing to do for your business to keep it growing, buyers understand those decisions. And quite frankly, I think they would take a lot more confidence out of the fact that you're thinking about maintaining and growing value in that business rather than trying to make a short-term clip and, by the way, take advantage of that and squeeze them for more money. So,
of course, they can see it as blind as day. They're like holding back, or they cut team numbers versus the previous year to bolster the profit or something. And you're like, am I buying a house of cards here?
Everything comes out in due diligence, right? And one thing I'll say is I have so many people who create this analogy of selling a business and selling a home, and hey, we've come almost full circle here about the legislation and why people probably draw those parallels. But at the end of the day, selling a business is almost nothing like selling a home. Nobody ever walks into a business and goes, oh God, I love the kitchen and bathroom and it's so close to the school. Let's just pay the extra 50 grand. No one ever does that. So, if anything, it's the complete opposite. People come in going, this is business. I need to be shrewd. I need to ask questions. I need to really think about everything and question everything. And by the way, I'm bringing my team of advisors who are bloody well smart people who are highly educated and they've done this before. So you need to start with understanding what the rules of the game are, right? And that, look, and in my view, you're dealing with smart people. These are, once again, not stupid people. So they're going to see what you're doing and they're going to understand the context. So I just think, make decisions with the best intentions at heart. Make decisions with the idea of growing and building and maintaining value, and be upfront and open about things. And you're far more likely to build trust and get to a good outcome rather than trying to play silly buggers and play around the fringes.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And that's the thing, as you said, people don't understand the fact that often that their business is actually their most valuable asset, right? Not only is it, unlike you say, but I've got a home and it's worth $1.5 million. That's great, but does it give you an income?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, right? And can you sell that home for 2, 3, 4 times its profit, or plus assets and stock and whatever else, and then you end up with, $4 million cash in the bank, or something, and it's like, I think people just don't seem to see that all the work they're doing shouldn't be for profit focus. Yes, profit is important, absolutely, because you can reinvest it and everything and live off it and all of that. But it has to be run in parallel. As I understand it, you need to run your business's value creation as well as profitability at the same time. And not skimp, not save, put those systems in place, buy that bloody machine. Because if someone then buys the business, they're going to buy the machine anyway when they buy it off you. So don't wait. You're creating a better business that may produce more profit by the time you go to sign the deal. Therefore, you get a 3 or 4 times multiple or 2.5 times multiple, whatever it is, of that extra profit at that time. So you've got a bigger sale value because you've kept focused on growing a very good business. Because the goal is to build a good business that has value. That's what people want to buy.
Imagine, Simon. Imagine as well you get like an entrepreneur gets that, right? And they're gunning for every extra dollar all the way through to the sale. They've got the exit in mind before they started, right? So do you see that that mindset is different compared to a family business, second generation, someone that sort of maybe takes a business. It's easy to take a business for granted when it's been around for a while. It's hard to remember how freaking hard it was to start and get it to a point where it was sustainable. So do you see different mindsets when it comes to that exit?
Absolutely. I've often said, for those who are in Sydney and understand the accelerator scene and all the rest of it, Stone and Chalk and all the rest of them down at Wynyard Station there, nobody understands the idea of exiting and starting with the end game in mind more than a tech startup today. These guys go all in. They've begged, borrowed, and stole, family, fools, friends. They've got every last cent that they could possibly get. They've thrown it into the adventure. They are all in. And they know if they don't get that big exit at some point, it could be lights out. All right. So they get it. They're working towards that end game. And it is a very, very different mindset, to say somebody who is in a 40 or 50 year family business. I've got a number of clients and have had many over the years that are family run enterprises. It could be 20 years old. It could be 40. It could be 50, where the father, the patriarch usually, was working somewhere, thought he could do it better, went out on his own, started a business, literally, used the coins in my pocket to buy one widget, sold that widget, went back, bought two more, and so forth. And next, they've got a business 40 years later that's turning over 30, 40, $50 million. It's provided their family with an amazing life. But often they've never really thought about exit. They've never really thought about planning it. And I'll say a few things here. One, usually they've never structured things properly. So the entity could actually be owned in the wrong name. They've not thought about tax. They've not thought about
IP or anything.
Yeah, right. And IP is the big one. We've got a number of clients who have gone and then opened up or started selling into the US, and where do you hold licensing and IP and all this sort of stuff versus operating entities. So all of that structuring stuff needs to be right. And the sooner you do it, the better, because there can be capital gains implications. But then, all the way through to what does it look like for the family? And I'm going to say, I've had lots of clients where, there's maybe two siblings in the family now, and one's worked in the business for 25 years while the other perhaps has sometimes, in a lot of cases, gone off the rails a bit or just chosen a different life. And there can be real conflict at a family level. And then all of a sudden, because there's no rules of engagement, there's no mechanisms to handle some of this stuff, you start seeing parents perhaps in their heyday starting to try to, hey, I'm feeling a bit older. I really want to help this one son or daughter. I'm going to start throwing money at them and, try to buy their way out of problems. And the other siblings, like, I've been working for 25 years. I deserve better. All this stuff, right? It becomes really, really complicated. And I think I think there's a 3-circle Venn diagram for every industry, right? So here's mine. There's a circle that says family members, there's a circle that says business owners, and there's a circle that says employees, and they all intersect, right? And so where they intersect, it actually creates 7 different types of stakeholder. Oh, I'm a family member and I work in the business, but I have no shares. Oh, I'm an employee and I'm a business owner, but I'm not part of the family. All these different stakeholders who all have different needs and different desires, and all of a sudden we find ourselves with a very large asset making lots of money and lots of people with different agendas. And nobody's actually had a discussion around, well, what would be a smart, orderly exit for people as they get to the point where they want to get out?
So how do you manage that? Like, how do you manage expectation? Like, what's some of the storytelling you say there? I guess one extreme is, all right, well, let's just say this business didn't exist or it was owned by an institution. Yeah. Is there kind of, you must be a bit of a counselor as much as you are an advisor.
Yeah, very much so, mate. I often liken it to a big bowl of spaghetti. There's all this stuff, and where does it start and where does it end? And here's the classic, right? So many business owners that we speak to, they're smart people, they're caring people, they're empathetic people, they love their family, they love their employees, they want to do the right thing. And so they see a particular issue they're trying to solve, and they go, okay, I'll pull this lever because that'll solve that problem. So they pull that lever, it solves that problem, but then 3 others pop up because they pulled that lever. So they end up pulling levers and nothing ever seems to be right. So, but really the short answer is that you need to sit down and start to unpack these things, try to separate and isolate the various different issues in their life. Okay, there's some family and relationship stuff here. There's some employees over there that we want to take care of. There's other shareholders in the business, And by the way, shareholder agreements, please. Like when you start a business and you're all friends and you all love each other and you're hugging it out and high-fiving about the new world and we're going to take it over and it's great, that's the time to have a shareholders agreement and have a real conversation around, hey, what happens if I want to leave in 5 years or you want to leave, or what happens if we end up hating each other? That's the time to do it, and maybe have a beer and a laugh about it if you need to, but do that talk, have a shareholders agreement, put in place a mechanism for people to get out, because this stuff happens all the time.
And Simon, to add to that, having owned a legal practice for nearly a decade, and focusing on estate and business succession was a big part of what we were doing, and the concepts of the damage that's caused by not having that in place, or if you realize you don't have it, the earlier you can get it in place, the better. And I think one people think is like, oh, I don't want that included in the shareholders agreement. That's unfair. It's like, yeah, but it applies to you as well.
Yeah.
So if it's applying to that person, it's going to apply to you. And it's often that there's this ego attached to it. It's like, you're trying to screw me or something. It's like, well, no, what we're trying to do is trying to protect that. What if this happens? What if someone gets sick or dies? You know, who is their wife now going to come in as a director and try and run the business when she's got no experience and suddenly diminish all this value that you've built and the legacy that you're trying to create? And so and again, that's that advice piece. You need to get experienced solicitors to actually give you the appropriate advice around intellectual property, around your structuring of the business, for tax, for asset protection, for all those elements. You need to get the appropriate advice around that as well. Absolutely.
Definitely. Keyman Insurance is a good one as well. People don't get it because they think they don't need it. And we're just a small company. But then all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're turning over $10 million and like, wow, this thing's actually spitting out a lot of money. Oh, wow, this is actually worth something now. And look, let's be honest, circumstances change, people's approach changes. The time to get the agreement done is while you're completely aligned. And so, Keyman Insurance, all that sort of stuff is critical. And for anyone listening to this, if you want, would like to speak to someone about all that, it's not my area. I recommend people, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put you on to them, but go and have a talk to a specialist, whether it be the lawyer, the insurance specialist. These things need to be in place. If you need somebody to obviously talk about it and kind of collate the ideas before you go to the lawyer, that's great. That's where exit planners, advisors, and stuff like that come into play. But do it.
And it's much cheaper.
Yeah.
Don't have the discussion about what you want when you're talking with the solicitor in front of you, because I'll just sit there nodding, and every 6 minutes, change. You've got to get somebody else who can actually, in a neutral party, give you a framework, perhaps create a term sheet or something like that. So you've got it written down in front of you and you go, you know what, Simon? Yep, I'm happy with that. Are you happy with this? Not quite. Let's tweak it. All right, let's give that to the solicitor and get them to put it into the context of a shareholders agreement. It's such an undervalued element of business, because again, it's that concept, I think, of Steve Covey. It's start with the end in mind, right? The goal of you starting the business isn't to have a business that fails. Your goal of starting a business has a business that succeeds. And so if it does succeed, that's where the problems happen. If it fails, there's nothing to divvy up anyway, right? Or maybe debt. But if it succeeds, that's where the problems start to come in.
Yeah, look, absolutely. One thing I'll say, if anybody is listening to this who's a business owner and can relate to the kind of proverbial bowl of spaghetti and the complications with all that sort of stuff, I guess if I could share one little piece of advice for them, is that there is no silver bullet to this stuff. There is no one perfect solution where everybody walks away 100% happy and gets what they want. Life is about compromise, and everything you do will have compromises in it. But like I keep saying to my kids every day, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And it's the same thing here, right? You're not going to be able to give everybody what they want. But I think if you have a really thought out approach, you've got a clear plan, you can communicate that plan and show people how you're considering their needs. You can walk through this thing and get to the other end with some really, really positive outcomes. And while everybody might not jump in the air and go, yay, I've hit the jackpot and got everything I want, they'll walk away feeling good about the way they were treated. And usually they'll walk away feeling happy. And, that's a pretty powerful thing. And I think ultimately, if you are looking at the bowl of spaghetti, there is a way to walk through so you can see some light at the end of the tunnel. So don't feel like it can't be solved. There are solutions.
One question I want to ask you is, clearly you've learned a lot in your time, in your career, and being in business, corporate, other areas, seeing a lot of business owners clearly, and they're in those different phases of looking to prepare a business for sale or selling a business and the aftermath of that and all of the stuff that comes with it. So what's something that you've picked up, like a real, piece of wisdom or a nugget that you've picked up that you would love to take back to a younger version of yourself? What would that piece of advice be that you would give to yourself?
God, I have so many. I was such a naive, arrogant twat when I was young. So, pardon me, I probably shouldn't say that.
Sounds familiar.
You're a guy.
Anyone on this podcast wasn't like that?
That's
cool.
Your ticket to play,
Yeah, the amount of mistakes I've made, and I probably wasn't all that great at taking the advice. I had to go and learn things the hard way and all the rest of it. So I think one piece of advice is seek out people who have been there and listen. You don't necessarily have to implement everything exactly the way they say it, but take it on board with a sense of humility because, I see my kids do this to me, just like I did it to my parents. When you're talking to people sometimes and you can actually see that they're only listening to respond, not listening to understand. It's.
Is there another function for a child?
Yeah.
I just thought that was the only way it worked.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to finish so I can say what I want to say.
Yeah.
No, actually stop and listen to these people because you can learn a lot and save yourself a lot of time, money, heartache, all of that sort of stuff. So keep an open mind, really listen to people and seek more information. Beware of your own biases. We convince ourselves of so much shit that is not real, but we just keep telling ourselves it's real and convince ourselves that that's the way things have to be done.
It's really interesting. I just did a keynote yesterday, and one of the areas I've been researching is cognitive bias. Yeah. Do you know how many there are? Got any 188 separate cognitive biases that shape your thinking and decision making. We've got no hope. No hope to make good decisions.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Like I keep hearing the advice I try to give my kids, and it keeps coming back to me as advice that's actually valid for all humans. But I always say to my kids, it's, don't ever be scared of asking questions in class. I know when I was a kid, I was scared of putting my hand up asking questions because I thought everyone would think I was dumb. Whereas now you actually sit there and go, oh, I get it. The kids actually asking the questions, they're the smart ones. They're the ones that actually recognize they don't have the answers and they're willing to go seek those answers. And so apply that to your own business for a moment and start reaching out to those who can perhaps add value and keep an open mind to it. So that's one. I think it's a mindset thing there. The second piece of advice I want to give people is actually circling back to what you said, Sean, you already nailed it, is that you should build a business that's saleable. Build it so that, fundamentally, it's just an asset. It's not you. So build it in a way that the business can be sold. Even if you do not want to sell it, you might be thinking, I'm going to hand this business down to my kids and my grandkids. This will be a multi-generational, wonderful legacy thing. It's fabulous. And all of that is wonderful. And then tomorrow, somebody gets hit by a bus and your entire life changes and all of those requirements change. And so if you build a business that is saleable, and this is the most important thing here, it gives you options. It keeps options open. It allows you to have flexibility should life change. And hey, let's be honest, life changes all the time.
Mate, great advice. You've been working on that exit to this interview all day. I can tell. That was perfect, mate. Look at that. Bowl of spaghetti.
Give me the questions next time so I can prepare.
Drop that mic, mate. I love it. Well done. Thanks, Simon. Super insightful. My brain goes off with the fairies a bit when we have these conversations because it just brings up so much of your own life and your options, and you're like, oh, taking notes. Got to do this. I've got to do that. No doubt, if you and Sean found yourself in the same bar with a beer, you could regale yourselves on all sorts of micro transactions, which we'll leave out of the scope of today's podcast. Simon, thanks, mate. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day. I think there's so much value there. Exit Advisory Group. Reach out, even if you're thinking about it. I mean, engage someone now, right? You might not be looking to exit tomorrow, but if you're just interested, it's never too early to start thinking about how you're going to leave, is it?
Yeah, look, definitely. One of the things I'd say is that, generally speaking, usually, unless maybe you're Alan Bond, you're only going to exit a business once. So, to that end, it may end up being tomorrow, or it may be in 10 years' time. If you just have some questions that you just want to sort of sound out to somebody, reach out. I'm happy to jump on a call. There's no expectation for people to do stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, if we can provide some value, fantastic. If you want some more help down the track, lovely. If you don't, that's cool. We want business owners to end well. We want them to have a good journey and have a good finish to that. And, sometimes just a cup of coffee and a quiet word will help people get over the line with that. And, very happy to help with that.
And appreciate that, Simon. And the other thing is that obviously if someone's thinking or even borderline thinking about selling having been in this industry too, sometimes it'll be a couple of years before someone says, you know what, I'm ready to actually go. Let's do something. Let's work together and move forward, because I'm actually ready now to consider selling and preparing a business and, taking the time required. So, reaching out to get some certainty around, well, these are the type of things you need to do. I think that's going to be really, really beneficial. Because the earlier you start, the higher the value is going to be when you actually get to exit.
Indeed. Give yourself some runway, right?
Indeed. So,
mate, love
awesome.
Killing it. All right, Simon. Thanks so much, mate.
Pleasure, guys.
Exit
Thanks for
Advisory
having me.
Group, Simon Bedard, Bedard. Whack it into Google and follow the yellow brick road. And that wraps up another episode of The Few. Thank you to our partners, Afterburner, for team building, development and alignment. We understand now how important it is to have the right people around you. Get them on board with where you want to go. Momentum Media, the largest industry publisher in the country, connecting your business to the Australian community. ICMI, Australia's premier speaker bureau, representing the few that do fulfill their life's purpose. And finally, Sean's Inner Circle, the business coaching organisation for small and medium enterprises looking to make that next step. Thanks again for listening in and downloading today. Please leave a review on whatever platform you are currently listening to this podcast, and reach out to our partners who can help you make the transition to the few.
Thanks for having me,
Awesome.
guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Simon.
it.
Appreciate it.